Shalom, everybody. This is Olivier Melnick with Shalom and Messiah. I want to talk about the ceasefire. I want to talk about the hostage situation because I have questions, and I'm confused. I'm concerned, and I'm even a little ticked at the people behind it. So I need clarity. And who do I need to bring on the show if I need clarity? Well, I need to bring my good friend, John Holler. So, John, welcome to the show again.
Good to be with you, Olivier. I noticed that you said that you brought me on for clarity, but not shortness,
No,
brevity.
I cannot if I need the Cliff Note versions of any topic, I cannot bring you on the show.
Should show you that I don't write cliff notes.
No, John. It's always a pleasure to have you. You have a lot of you always help me and our audience connect the dots. I know a lot of people appreciate what you bring to the table. So, friends. We are going to try to make sense of all this. Make sure you visit the website at shalomandmessiah.com and connect with us. You can also support us if you click that donate button. We are a 501c3 faith-based ministry. We need your support more than ever. So consider helping us that way and keep us in your prayers for the crazy times we live in. Uh, uh, John, people want to get a hold of you. Where do they go?
They can go to Fellowship Bible Chapel YouTube channel, Real FBC on Rumble. I'm on X, John Haller 54, and fbchapel.com.
Okay, very good. And I will put all that information as I usually do in the description of the videos that we do together. So as we do this, as we speak, John, it appears that the ceasefire has been approved. I mean, last night you and I decided to do a show. It was like on and off and on and off. And as of this morning, as of this right now, we're doing this. We could almost do it live. It's on, but I'll tell you. Okay, I'm going to tell you what I think, and you're going to tell me. If there's any validity in what I'm thinking. And again, I'm not a political analyst. I use common sense the best I can. I see. Okay, so they've announced that 33 hostages will come back. We don't know how many of them will come back alive. We don't know how many of them will come back dead bodies. Um, they said that it's going to be like 6 weeks, 42 days, spread of time for 33 hostages, which to me sounds very, very weird. Why do you need 42 days to release 33 people unless you need 42 days to do something else in the meantime? So now we have a ceasefire signed between Israel and Hamas, and that, to the best of my understanding, reopens the Philadelphia corridor, which is the southwest border, or the south border, I should say, of the Gaza Strip, with the one that the Gaza Strip has with Egypt, which has been the main entry point for weapons that we know of over the last few years. So that reopens that for 42 days. We've got 33 hostages coming back to Israel. So my question is, why only 33? Why 42 days? And can Hamas rearm? Some people say they can't actually. So I'm curious about your opinion on that. Can Hamas rearm? We know we cannot trust Hamas. That we know. I mean, we don't have to go anywhere, do and ask anybody. We know they cannot be trusted. And another thing that bothers me, John, is the lack of I mean the the moral equivalence they're trying to push on us. Like they're calling the Hamas, the people that they're going to release from Israel, they call them detainees. So they're going to release hostages to get detainees, Palestinian detainees. They're terrorists. And so the press is so anti-Israel, so changing or continuing to change the narrative, continuing to push the Israeli guilt any way they can. And this, of course, comes a couple of days, and I'm sure you've seen this after the release. I'm in the process of doing an analysis and an article on that. The release of the 2024 ADL report on anti-Semitism, when they did like 58,000 people were polled, and the biggest takeaway from that report. There's more to it. We won't really have a chance to talk about it today, but the biggest takeaway is that, according to their findings, half of the global adult, so global adult population, half of them, I think it's 46%, harbor anti-Semitic views. Half of the global adult population harbors anti-Semitic views. So this is what we have. I don't understand the pushing. Biden wants to take credit for the hostage release, which is ridiculous. Trump wants to take credit. He's got more in the game than Biden, of course. So where do we start, John? I mean, you and I are both not too thrilled about it. Are we? Are we being negative? I want all the hostages to go home. I want this to be over. You too. We're not saying that, in essence, a hostage release and a ceasefire are bad things. No, they're good things. All things being equal, which of course I don't think it is. So, John, for once I was a little long, but I'm going to let you take over now.
So I have a lot of negative feelings about this, a lot
Yeah.
of concern about this. Um, Olivier, those of us who followed this for a long time, this is not our first rodeo. There have been many, many attempts at these things. They've all failed. I sent you a listing from, I got it off Chris Hedges' Twitter feed, and Chris is a extremely left-wing Marxist, anti-Israel
Yeah,
guy.
by the way, I'm showing it on the screen right now so people can see, and I will link it in the description, but you're not going to be able to read it in the video. It's too small. So I'll go back to the to you and I on the screen, but I'm showing it right now. So keep talking. That's okay.
So you know, the point is that all of these things have failed. So for example, on the thing that you showed on the screen, back in 2002, 2005, they talked about a ceasefire agreement that had been reached, and a lot of these are between, either Hamas or Palestinian Authority. But let's just use the 2005 one as an example. They said, oh, Israel went into this, and immediately Israel started building a barrier in the area of Judea, Samaria, the West Bank. And now, it's not a wall everywhere. It's only a wall in places where they had sniper fire. That was a
Yeah.
problem. So they did that, but it's mostly a fence.
Yeah, it is a
And you
chain
can,
link. I mean, when you drive, it's a chain link fence, and you're going like, "That's the wall." I mean, it's surprising. The first time I saw that, I'm going like, "Oh wow!" I expected the wall, the big concrete wall with all the graffiti all across, and it's not even close.
yeah, and it has resulted in these different agreements, the Oslo Accords, and all these roadmaps to peace, and can't all these accords things have resulted in these kind of crazy. If you drive around the area of Judea and Samaria just to do some sightseeing, you really got to know what you're doing. It's possible to get from one place to another, but the roads are mostly what we would call flyover roads that are Israeli roads. They fly over those areas so you don't have to get off and nobody can get on. There's a way to do it when you go into various towns, but it's difficult. So, for example, if you're going sightseeing and you want to go to Bethel or to Ai, um, you've got to know the way around to get there because the
Yeah.
roads are separated. And it was interesting. We were up in Shem in Nablus with Joel Kramer many years ago, and he pointed to a big house. You may have seen it up there on the hilltop there above Nablus. It's the largest home in the area of, quote, the West Bank. And he said, that's the wealthiest person in this area. And I said, what does he do? Sell security fencing to Israel? Because there's a lot of security fencing there. And there was security fencing along the Gaza border. It was down at the Gaza border just a little 2 years and a month ago.
Yeah.
Everything was peaceful. We were at some of the kibbutzim that were invaded on October 7th. The hostages were taken. So let's talk a little bit about this deal. So it's supposedly a ceasefire. I'll give you the example. This is sort of how I feel about the hostages. I can't remember the guy's name. He's from up in the Galilee, but he's a member of Ben Gavir's party. He's resigning. I read his letter of resignation. He's resigning from the government. He says, because I can't do that. And he said, I went over to the house of a friend, someone who's become a friend. His daughter is being held hostage in Gaza. And I said, I've spent time with this family, gone through the emotions and the stress of having their daughter held hostage by these terrorists. And we can only imagine what's been happening to her. But this member of Knesset said, listen, I want her home. My heart wants her home. And my one eye is crying and one eye is weary, something to that effect.
Wow.
Because he says, I cannot oppose the deal. And I know that I cannot approve the deal. And I know that by not approving the deal, your daughter may die. And
this is really, I'm thinking about this whole thing. And they are caught between a rock and a hard place because you want to eradicate Hamas, but the only way to do it is just kind of level the whole place. But that's going to kill the rest of the hostages. So this is, Israel doesn't want that. Nobody wants that except for Hamas, of course. They don't care.
Well,
about lives.
I don't know. I think there are people in Israel that want to level the place. I mean, it's already been largely leveled.
It has been, yeah.
But it's so complicated because I do not understand in a war situation. And Anthony Blinken, who's going out of office in a day or a couple days, gave an interview to the New York Times last week. I played a little bit of it in my update. And he said, we noticed that every time we pressured Israel or saw that we started pushing to give aid to Hamas, that Hamas got harder to deal with. And it was like, what do you think? Do you not understand? How did you get to be Secretary of State if you're that ignorant of how the people that you're negotiating with negotiate? This is how they negotiate. And it was so frustrating. And I heard interview this morning, Mike Waltz on Dan Senor's Call Me Back. He's a security advisor to Trump. And he said, well, we're going to go in there and we're going to be tough. And you know what? At this point, Olivier, my point is prove it. There's been a lot of rhetoric and talk about all hell to pay if the hostages are not released by noon on January 20th. So let's hold them to that promise, because and I know that if you go in there full bore, the hostages will die. They will. And so out of the, 100 or so that are still being held, it's pretty sure that 33 or 34 of them are dead. So the hostages are supposed to be released in drips, 4 this week, children and women, mothers this week, and then the female soldiers, the 4 or so that are still being held next week. And by the way, I have a friend in Israel. I've interviewed him a number of times. One of his daughter's best friend is one of those young female soldiers that's been held now. Longer, by the way, than our hostages were held in Iran.
In Iran, yeah.
Back in 1979 and 1980.
Yeah.
And, they were released as Nixon was being sworn in. So I don't know what will happen. We will know within a week when the first hostages are released whether the Bibas family is still alive. Hamas has said they're dead, but there's been no proof of that. They're going to hold the bodies of the people who are dead until the last release, is my understanding today. Which is, imagine the cruelty of this. You're going to make everybody wait until they see who's released before you know whether your loved one is alive or dead. It is a cruelty that is, I'm sorry, maybe unmatched in human history, what Hamas is doing. But I see people all over my feed. So you mentioned the ADL report. 50% hold anti-Semitic views. I think they undershot that by a good bit. If my X feed is any indication, the anti-Semitism in this world is out of control.
Yeah.
Everything is the Jews' fault. There's a guy on Twitter. I'll give you an example. I'll probably play a response to his nonsense the other day. So you will hear people like Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Thomas Massey, a congressman from Kentucky, complain about Israel has bought the Congress. Israel's given contributions, and they put up these charts to show that there have been contributions made by AIPAC to a lot of different people. Okay, that's fine. Where are all the other charts of all the other money? The money that's given by AIPAC is a pittance compared to all the other money that flows into Washington. But it's the Jews. It's the Jews. The Jews.
Yeah, it's the double standards.
And I'm telling you, I've had it up to here. If I put my hand up, my camera might move up with it. So I've really had my fill of this. So this guy put up a thing. His name's Ian Carroll. There's a very good 9-minute video responding to that by Elika Laban. She's an Iranian lawyer, Jewish pro-Israel activist. I think she lives in the UK. She's from Iran. Very eloquent.
What's her name again? What's her name?
Elika Laban. Lebon.
Never heard that name.
Elika the Good, right? Isn't that what the French? She's very good. She's a lawyer. I always love that about people. But the whole thing is nonsense. It's sort of like, I even hear Christians ranting about the money that we've given to Israel. We give $3 billion a year to Israel. Well, first of all, they have to spend the money here. So it's not like it's free money, right?
Right.
And it's the same way, by the way, with aid to Ukraine is largely very restricted as to where it can be spent. But the Israeli money, if it's $3.8 billion, it's like 0.06% of the federal budget. And people act like it's bankrupting us. It contributes to it, but I'm just telling you, it's complete nonsense. So back to the ceasefire deal.
So
the hostages.
Yeah, I was going to say, who do you think is in Washington? Who do you think is mostly behind the pushing the ceasefire? Biden really doesn't have a whole lot to do with it.
I think it's Blinken, but look, all the reports I have read is that the Trump people were very actively involved in this, and if that's true, that's troubling. That's very, very troubling. That's not what we were told, Olivier.
Is there are we able to connect this with maybe the reviving and the expanding of the Abraham Accord under Trump too?
Yeah, I heard, as I said, I heard Mike Waltz, a security, going to be a security. He's a congressman right now. He'll be a security advisor next week for the Trump administration or soon. And he said, this is all about, we're going to be pushing the expanding the great Abraham Accords, the big, beautiful Abraham Accords. I'm just telling you what he's talking about. I can read, I can listen, I can understand English. But look, if you look at this deal, a couple months ago, when things got really bad, Qatar, I'll say Qatar, okay? And by the way, Qatar people don't really care how you pronounce it. They just like that you talk about them. But Qatar came out and said, we're kicking all the Hamas leadership out of Qatar. Get out of here. Now, it appears they went to Turkey, by the way.
You mean Qatar?
Qatar, yeah.
Oh, and when you say
some
Qatar,
people say Qatar, Qatar.
I'm thinking
so,
Cutter. So who is he talking about? Oh, Qatar. Okay, never mind.
No, I mean that's how some people say it. So Qatar, we'll call it Qatar.
You're such an American. I think you're such an American.
There's a guttural sound in there. You're not even saying it right. I've watched videos on it. And one of the videos said, listen, we just want you to talk about us. We don't care how you say it. We all know what you're talking about. So anyway, so Qatar. We're going to kick them all out. Well, they're all back now, right? They're all living in luxury. These guys, Hania had a fortune of somewhere around $4 billion. A couple of the other guys, I can't remember his name. I think it begins with a K, who's now sort of one of the heads of Hamas. He lives there. He's probably worth $3 billion. But the troubling part of this is that all reports that I've read indicate that Trump's new Middle East advisor, a guy named Steve Witkoff, has been heavily involved. And in fact, the report is that Steve Witkoff moved Netanyahu further from his position on this issue that anybody in the Biden administration had done in 4 years, even though Trump is not yet in office, even though these people do not yet have government authority. But what's the problem? Witkoff had some financial problems a year or so ago.
Okay.
He owned the Park Lane Hotel. You may have seen it. It's on Central Park South in New York. It's right next to the what used to be the Trump Plaza. And his business partner, turned out to be a fraudster. He had fled the country. He was from Malaysia. The government was trying to seize the hotel to pay money that had been lost or money that was owed. And lo and behold, here comes the guys from Qatar, the Qatar Sovereign Wealth Fund, which has about $800 billion in it, and bought him out for about $630 million. I want people to remember that a number of years ago, the Kushner family, probably 5 years ago, the Kushner family was in very big trouble on their biggest real estate purchase. In fact, it was the most expensive purchase of an office building in world history. And that was the infamous building at 666 Fifth Avenue in New York. And they were helped refinance that by Qatar.
So Qatar is involved in a lot of financial deals, and I mean, I know they own a lot of different things in France too. I know that
they have spread money all over the place. They've invested tens of billions of dollars in U.S. universities.
Yeah.
Why do you think these U.S. universities are so pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas? It's because they're getting money from the head of the snake. The head of the snake in all of this is Qatar.
So
Qatar is the money bags of the Muslim Brotherhood.
So a little side note here, and emphasis on little. I don't want to go too long on that. The universities in America, when Trump says you're going to lose your funding if you support Palestinian narrative and if you support Hamas, they don't care, because they won't lose their funding because they've got funding from Qatar. Is that correct?
Yeah, they have funding from Qatar, and a place like Harvard has this massive endowment that they get tens of billions of dollars a year from in interest, on the investments that they make. Just like, by the way, the King of Jordan did a little research on him. His wife is a Palestinian. His family isn't even from Jordan. They were an Arabian tribe that used to run Mecca and Medina. And in Sykes-Picot, they were given the kingdom of Jordan. And I heard a security expert named Amiat Cohen on Carolyn Glick about a week ago, and he said, we need to start referring to him, King Abdullah II, as the last king of Jordan. So I just want people to kind of put all of this into kind of a Bible prophecy perspective.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on, but Qatar is Muslim Brotherhood. They are the money bags of the Muslim Brotherhood in the world. They spread their money all over the place. And by the way, when the head of Hamas, Hania, was assassinated in an Iranian Revolutionary Guard safe house in Tehran by Israel back, when was that, September? I mean, it seems like it's a long, long time ago, but it wasn't that recent.
Right.
I played clips of his funeral, Hania's funeral. What happened to him, by the way? His body was taken to Qatar, where he lived. And they had, in the big mosque in Qatar, they had his funeral attended by the emirate or the emir or sultan or whatever they call him, the head of the Qatar government, was sitting there at the funeral, which was kind of a lot of people thought it was kind of unusual. You go to memory.org and you can see what was said at the funeral by the imam.
Memory, MEMRI, not memory. Memory, MEMRI, Middle East Media Research Institute, very good resource.
Right, but understand that sort of the money bags of the head of the Muslim Brotherhood snake is Qatar.
Yeah.
The feet and hands is Turkey. And so this is why Turkey is behind what's going on. The guy that Al-Jilani, whatever his name is this week
in Syria.
The Saudi guy. He born in Saudi Arabia.
But you're talking about Al-Jilani, the guy who's like in Syria right now.
Yeah, the guy that's head of Syria.
Yeah.
They say he's Hamas, Islamic Jihad. That's all Muslim Brotherhood is the overarching organization. And they took over Egypt for a year. You know, they had to have a military coup to kick them out of Egypt. But Erdogan is Muslim Brotherhood. Qatar is Muslim Brotherhood. Hamas is Muslim Brotherhood. They're all in this together. They're not to be trusted. And I'm sorry, the only way to get rid of this, I like what Pete Hegseth, the incoming, I think he's going to become the Secretary of Defense, said, we need to kill every last one of them. I don't know any other way. That doesn't sound very Christian or anything, but I live in a real world.
Right.
Where there are real problems.
How do you kill every last one of them without, Israeli casualties?
You can't. But here's the problem. So let's look at this. Let's go back to the ceasefire. So the hostages are going to be released, but why does it go 42 days? It goes 42 days to allow Hamas to reconstitute itself. Look, there's good intelligence that while there has been 20,000 or more Hamas fighters killed in Gaza over the last year and few months, that they've recruited 15,000 new members. And that's understandable. There's nothing to do in the Gaza Strip. Hamas has money. They steal all the aid. They resell it. They use the money. And then the question becomes, why are we allowing that to happen? Why is Israel being forced by the world to allow the aid in there to fund their enemy? This is the most unusual war I've ever seen, ever. I mean, you could go back through the history books and you will never see another one like this. And then they call it a genocide. It's not a genocide.
No.
It's a war, folks. So listen, I don't want to see people die, but I also know that the reality is that people have got to do this. So the 42 days on the ceasefire I know we've kind of gotten off on a bunch of rabbit trails, but the 42 days on the ceasefire is to allow Hamas to reconstitute itself and to get the people who have left the north and moved to the south during the war to go back to the north. Israel did not want that to happen. They didn't want those people to come back to the north because they have communities, Ashkelon, Sderot, and some of
Ashdod.
the
Yeah.
Ashdod, and some of the worst kibbutzim massacres occurred are in that area right across the fence. I mean, I've stood there, Olivier. You're standing there in a kibbutz, and 1 kilometer away is the Gaza fence.
Oh, I was there last June. It's like you stand on the hill and then you look down and I mean it's right across the street sometimes.
Right,
Just,
and you stand there, and if you got a little elevation in the kibbutz where you're at, you can see the whole Gaza Strip in front of you.
yeah, we were in Sderot on a little hill in Sderot, and we're looking down, and then we were with Danny the Digger, and we're looking, and he goes, "You see that little, showing like in a distance like some kind of a little cityscape. I mean, very small." Nothing like New York or anything like that, and it was probably less than a kilometer. And he goes, "That's Gaza City."
Right. So we don't understand sometimes the distances. So those people are all going to go back to the north. There's not really a good plan in place. There's going to be a private security firm that's agreed to by both parties that's going to kind of monitor that to make sure weapons are coming. There's no indication that all of the tunnels have been destroyed. That there have been a lot of tunnels destroyed, but then they're going to turn over the eventually withdraw from Rafah, and the Philadelphia crossing, the Philadelphia corridor, is going to be given back to Egypt, which is where all the weapons and stuff came from to build the tunnels, to arm Hamas and everything.
That's what I just said
there.
in
And I don't know that there's
yeah.
adequate monitors for Israel.
Yeah, in the opening, I said that, and I'm glad you're confirming that. This is all the weapons are coming through the Philadelphia corridor. So it reopening it. I mean, short of giving Hamas, whoever's left of Hamas, the ability to self-rule, short of that, it's everything back to pre-October 7th.
Yeah. So the question is why, and I don't know that we know everything about the why this is being done. It may be that there is some agreement between the incoming Trump administration and the Netanyahu government, which may not be in place in a week, by the way, because Ben Gvir said he's resigning, but he'll make sure that Netanyahu can remain prime minister. But other people from his party are resigning. Even some of the Likud people are going to vote against this I don't think it's been presented to the Knesset yet. The Likud members are going to vote against it. I think his name is Halevi. He's just said, this is not why I came into government to approve a deal like this. So it's iffy whether this is, I think it's still up in the air. Whether
What,
it has,
the ceasefire, you mean?
Yeah, the ceasefire deal. I think it has to be voted on by the Knesset. It's past the cabinet level in the Israeli government. It has to go to the Knesset. I think it'll probably pass the Knesset. But if people get upset and enough people leave the coalition, what Netanyahu's coalition has 64 members. Well, they need 61 to govern.
That's
so if 5
tight.
people leave, they've got a problem.
They don't have a government.
That's right. And then we go back to a round of elections in the midst of a war, and Netanyahu will campaign for prime minister while he's under trial on some of these, what I could legally consider to be ridiculous, trumped up charges just to get him out of office.
And when you say,
telling you,
when you said trumped up charges, no pun intended, right?
That was an intentional usage of the word trumped up.
You're so bad.
No, because I don't know. I don't want to be. I feel like it's Friday. Some of the hostages are coming back. We should be happy, and I'm happy about that.
Well, whoever's coming back home to Israel, that's a win. That's a win. That's a life saved, and that's wonderful. But the big picture of that, and I was reading an article by Alan Dershowitz this morning, who says, please do not call this a deal. This is no deal. This is not a deal, because when you have a gun to your head and people tell you your life or your money, and you have to give them the money, it's not a deal.
So here's the other part of the arrangement is that when the hostages are released, let's say that over the next 6 weeks, all of the hostages are released. Israel's to release, I believe the number is 1,700 terrorists from prison where they're detained. For example, you remember back in, I think this happened in Judea, maybe it was in Samaria, the Fogel family, mother, father, 3 children, including one that was about 8 months old. A terrorist invaded their home and slashed their throats and killed them. That terrorist is slated to be released in this arrangement.
How
So
many?
some people have,
what? But that's Israel for you. How many people did they release for Gilad Shalit? 1,500.
yes, one of whom I believe was a guy named Sinwar,
Yahya?
who became the head of Hamas,
Yahya Sinwar, who's not dead.
but who
Oh,
devised all of this plan. And he is the one who is responsible for you look at Gaza, and it's a hellscape right now.
okay. So,
It
oh,
it
oh,
it looks like the Palisades after a fire. I mean, it's completely destroyed.
so,
He's responsible, but he got released in a hostage deal.
okay. So this is important. People pay attention to this. What year was Gilad Shalit? Was it like what, 5 years ago?
Well, maybe Sinwar was released in an earlier one, but I don't remember when the Shalit deal was reached.
But for
It's
one
at least,
guy,
I'm going to guess, 10 years ago.
okay, so for one guy, and maybe it was more than five. For one guy, they got close to what, 1,500 Palestinian terrorists, and we have the same idea here for 33 hostages, and we don't know who, and we don't know how many will be coming home in a body bag. We're getting what, 1,700. In those exchanges, you get people that are going to go back to Gaza and maybe not stay there, maybe go into the West Bank or Judea, Samaria. But these people are basically being released and with chances of committing more of the same kind of crimes. This is absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely. I mean, but how do you? Is there any other option? I mean, there's only two options. Well, there's three options. You wait until you can find all the hostages, and then you destroy Hamas, which would be a very long process. Which there's no indication that this is the end of the war. By the way, it's going to take a few more months, if not years.
Right.
But
By the
so
way, Shalit was released in 2011,
okay, so
13
that's,
years ago.
oh my goodness, time flies.
He had been
Wow.
held for 5 years.
Right. So we have the 1,700 people going back, who, by the way, the press is calling them detainees, not terrorists, not murderers, detainees, shoving down our throat a non-existing moral equivalence, and people are not even paying attention. But I think that's part of the normalization of anti-Semitism that I've been writing about for the last 5 years now. And so
So I saw an interview, Olivier, with Jeremy Gimpel and Ari Abramowitz. They're Zionists. They live in Judea hills, and they're farming and all that stuff. And I know these guys. They're good guys. And they ran some data. I don't know who did the calculations, but from historical analysis of what's happened in the past with these terrorists who are released in these deals to what's happening with these 1,700, they said you can expect around 400 Israelis to be killed by these people after release.
So that's the stats.
So the answer. So here's the calculation. It's horrible. We have to make this calculation. Do you just go in and say we hope that the hostages survive? but we're taking every one of them out. Because if you do that, you may be saving 400 lives. It's sort of the example. I thought about this when I traveled a lot after 9/11. What do I do as a believing man? I'm on a plane and one of these hijacking attempts occur. So I'm on a plane with 165 people, and some guy tries to take the plane. What's he going to do? Crash it? Take me to some place to be a hostage, like Entebbe and in Uganda, that led to that great raid in July 4th, 1976. And so I'm sitting there like, and I remember I had a discussion on Facebook with somebody about this. Well, what would you do? And I'm like, if I could, I would take them out. I would kill them. And somebody said, "Oh, what a terrible Christian you are! What that man won't get a chance to hear the gospel." And I'm like, I'm sure that the Lord would understand that the 165 other people on the plane who might not have ever heard the gospel need a chance to hear it too. I don't know what the answer is. This is not a perfect world until Moshiach returns. I know this.
Yeah.
So you have to make these calculations in governments, and governments are there to be a terror to the evil. That's one of the things they are supposed to be. That's the scriptural term I think that Paul used. So I think that we need to understand these terrorists are not going to go back and open a falafel shop someplace. They're going to go back and be the terrorists that they were before. And whether they go to, I don't even know if they're going, I don't know if they're Gaza detainees that are being released or Judea Samaria detainees that are
Probably
being
a
released,
mix.
or a combination.
Probably a mix.
Right. But they're going to go back to Judea Samaria, which is, I don't think we understand. There have been hundreds of terrorists killed in Judea Samaria since October 7th. It's one of the fronts, one of the 7, 8, 9, 10 fronts of the war that Israel's facing.
They're not talking about that. But here's something that comes to my mind. So what is the number that people are throwing at us as far as the hostages? 98 left? Is it 98?
Yeah, it's a little bit less than 100, I think.
Okay, so let's call it 100 for the sake of the argument here. You have 100 hostages that are supposed to go back to Israel. Why can't the Israeli government say, for a deal to be even possible, we need an account of every single one of who we are missing with a measurable way for us to see if they're alive or not. And there's plenty of ways to do that. And then they say, okay, now we have proof that all 100 are alive, or only 50, only 20, 25, whatever. But why do they not ask for a measurable way to see who is still left alive, and then they can make a decision?
Look, there's a practicality there. There's a political cost. If you make that kind of demand, immediately all the people in Israel are running around saying, "Oh my goodness, you're so cruel. How could you be so cruel to these poor people who are being held hostage? What a terrible human being you are."
Oh, you mean about letting people know that their loved ones are dead?
Yeah, the political pressure is, you don't care about the hostages. There are, I don't know. Look,
but
I think
if they're dead,
large,
if they're dead, there's nothing they can do about them. You need to preserve those who are alive.
But we don't know that they're dead, and so Hamas uses this as a terrorist negotiating tool,
right?
And because they know it divides Israeli society, that's what they're trying to do. And they've been getting away with it for 30, 40, however many years, 30 years. 20, 30 years. I don't know what the answer is, Olivier, but at some point, Israeli society has to have a discussion and say, we want the hostages back, but defeating Hamas, completely eradicating Hamas, completely destroying the tunnel system, completely destroying the tunnels under that massive barrier that's between Egypt and Gaza on the Egypt-Gaza border, not the Israel-Gaza border, through which all of this stuff has come,
Yeah. That's
have to be
tantamount. Yeah.
completely destroyed. And we will occupy that area. And I can tell you the political cost in the world environment right now will be enormous. I've asked this question many times because it's clear that Israel, the leadership in Israel, they lost the ability to conceive of what Hamas could do. They had warnings about some kind of invasion coming, and this book still needs to be written and investigated. But I've asked this question: if on October the 6th, the leadership of the IDF went to the Israeli government and said, Hamas is going to invade us in a massive way, and we need to do to Gaza, now that what we've seen they've done to Gaza, before a hostage is taken, before a hostage is killed, we need to act now and do this. Olivier, Israel was invaded on October 7th.
Absolutely.
Look at the world reaction. Look at the ADL report. What would have been the reaction if they did this without a hostage being taken?
Oh, they would have
It's
been
what they needed to do.
They would have been crucified on the world scene.
Yeah, it would have been much, much worse. And I've tried to ask this question because it's a very, very difficult situation that Israel's in. Israel is facing an existential threat from 7 fronts. The Gaza threat is not gone away. It's been lessened, but even now, Olivier, 5 Israeli soldiers were killed in the north of Israel just 2 days ago. 5 young IDF guys.
Yeah.
One of them was 19. I believe, by the way, he was from the Galilee, and I believe his family was part of a messianic.
Yeah.
Christian.
Weissman, or what's his name? Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so that was in the north, where Israel has had control for over a year, allegedly had control for over a year, but Hamas has been able to reconstitute itself there. What will happen in that area if all those people come back that are only monitored, not inspected or searched for weapons or anything, and the tunnels still exist? You're right. You're coming back close to where you were on October the 6th. And
that's
I don't
what
know
I told
that
you. We're back
acceptable.
to October 6th, and they're regrouping and they're preparing for their next attack. And so I don't know, John. I don't have an answer. I mean,
hey, well, you called me, and I don't have an answer either. I'm troubled by it. Look, and we always try to sort of unpack this in light of Bible prophecy and stuff like that.
Right.
And so there are a lot of balls in the air. So I know a lot of our friends, in general have said, Trump is coming into office. We're getting a reprieve for a little while. And my response to that is, no. Is this what a reprieve looks like? I'm sorry. This isn't a reprieve. This is, the things that are going to happen in Bible prophecy are going to happen.
Yeah.
They're set in motion. And I just think that we need to be honest about that, look, we're facing some potentially very troublesome times. And by the way, I don't know if you've been watching the podcast Sean Ryan and others have been putting up, whether you believe them or not, even if you believe them just a little bit, this stuff may be coming here.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
October 7th may be coming here with all the people we've let in across the border.
And do you mean by that against the Jews in America or against Americans in general?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm talking people killed, homes invaded, people taken hostage.
Yeah.
I mean, they're talking about it pretty openly in a lot of different areas. And all the terror threat reports say that this is a possibility.
Yeah.
And we all want to act like, oh, well, everything's going to be okay. I don't. I mean, you need to really become very situationally aware
No,
about what's going
the
on.
only difference between today and next Monday afternoon is that when some of those things happen, there will be some level of consequences, and the people will have to pay for their crimes a lot more than what has happened in the last 4 years. But that's not going to be enough of a deterrent for people to continue to commit their crimes, and so I agree with you. But that's a topic for maybe another podcast. We need to
That
wrap
all
this.
takes time. Yeah.
Right. We need to wrap this up.
All that takes time.
So we don't really have an answer, on the best solution for the ceasefire and the hostage situation, except that, of course, every single life matters. It matters to the people in Israel. It matters to people in the West. It couldn't, of course, Hamas couldn't care less about the next life, because to them life is just a regular commodity. They use it as a money, or whatever you want to call it. They obviously they don't care about their own people. But thinking about this from a biblical standpoint, life is very important. Israel cares about life. The dichotomy between the West and the Islamic world is that you have one ideology that values every single life, that will go so far for saving one life if they can, and the other ideology that literally worships death. And yet the Bible, God says that He cares for every single life, and He doesn't wish for anyone to perish. So as I'm closing this, um, always try to do, is I want to make sure that you have you being the audience, that you are right with God, because no matter what happens with the hostage situation in Israel, and the ceasefire, at the end of the day, you are going to respond to God personally. You're going to have to give an account, and you want to be on the right side of eternity. You want to be on the right side. You want to be on God's side, and that is simply done by believing that Yeshua died for your sins, my sins, John's sins, your sins, died and rose again as God in the flesh, the Son of God, the Messiah of Israel, Savior of the world. So if you're a believer, then it's good. You don't have anything to do but to pray for more people to come. If you're not a believer, today is your day. Just simply believe that Yeshua is who he said He was, and that He has paid the price for your sins. Because no matter what the situation is in the world, God, I mean, we don't know. I love this expression, John. When we don't know what tomorrow holds, and certainly in the world we live in, we don't know what tomorrow holds, but we know who holds tomorrow, and God is in control. And so, if you're not a believer, today's your day. Put your trust in the death and resurrection of Yeshua the Messiah, Jesus. It's that important. John, thank you for joining. Final word from you.
Thank you, Olivier.
Any?
Boy, I would just ask people to pray hard about this, because this is a troubling situation. I don't know. Well, I know that there's an ultimate answer to this. In the meantime, we have to deal with all of the humans that are involved in this. I'm concerned. I'm sitting here looking at articles about the memorials taking place at Auschwitz, and I'm trying to factor what happened 80 years ago into what's going on right now.
Right. And by the
And
way, I think that Poland has backpedaled. They're gonna let just happened yesterday. I think they're gonna let Netanyahu. I wrote an article on that. They're gonna let Netanyahu attend the Auschwitz memorial on, I believe it's International Holocaust Memorial Day, January 27th every year, which is the day that Auschwitz was liberated. And this year is 80 years and they're going to let Netanyahu attend and not arrest him based on the bogus ICC arrest warrant that was issued a little while ago. So that's a little bit of good news. We can finish, on a little bit of good news. John, thank you for
Thank
thank
you,
you for
Olivier.
nothing. We didn't come up with a solution, but
Always glad to not contribute to the furtherance of anything.
no, John, you're always helpful. Thank you again.
Thanks.
Where can people find you?
Fellowship Bible Chapel on YouTube, Real FBC on Rumble, and I do a number of like roundtables. Those are streamed on X and Telegram and Facebook and YouTube and Rumble most of the time. So we have another one on technology coming up with Patrick Wood, Scott Townsend, Pritchett, and this time Pete Garcia will be joining us.
Very good. All right, John, until next time, shalom. And to all of you, shalom and be blessed.